Good morning. And welcome to Interfaith Community Sanctuary. So this is our fourth Sunday. This is the fourth Sunday of the year. And as most of you know, the fourth Sunday has been the traditional service of Reverend Karen Lindquist. And she's been doing this service for decades, I should think. And also, as many of you know, Reverend Karen is not well. And so she has asked me to fill in for her. And so I'm doing so today. I want to make it clear, I'm not here to try to replace Karen. I'm not in any position to do that. I'm basically here to fill a space in her calendar. And I'm sure she would love to be here today, but physically she just simply can't. So I'm going to ask all of us here to do something with me, if you will. And that is just to take a few minutes of stillness and silence and to bring Reverend Karen into your awareness in any way you feel comfortable with. And if you have a mind to, you can invite her to sit next to you for the rest of the service. So let's just take a minute and do that. Welcome, Karen. And now, as is our tradition, we start each of our services with a invitation to our ancestors to join us, and also a tribute and recognition of our First Peoples. And to do that this morning, Chris has been so kind to volunteer.
Good morning. Thank you, George, and thank you, everyone. And I also wanted to acknowledge the virtual folks there and to thank the folks who do that audiovisual work, and especially thanking to Zach Brown, who very, in an emergency fashion, was able to rework today's audio and visual presentation. So thank you to all who do that, and thank you especially to Zach for today. My prayer for ancestors today, earlier this month, I realized that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would have been 95 this year, and thinking of my own father, he also would have been 95 towards the end of the year, so just within a few months of each other, my dad and Martin Luther King were walking this earth, and I wish to honor them and all of our ancestors and all that come to our mind today with this prayer. Oh God, we thank you for the lives of great saints and prophets in the past who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties and trials of life and not give in. We thank you for our ancestors and foreparents who've given us something in the midst of the darkness of exploitation and oppression to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and the proper determination of will, so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. In the name and spirit of the Creator, we pray. Blessed be. And I'd also like to take this time, as George mentioned, to honor our First Peoples. There were many, many peoples that crossed these lands that we now call the Americas. I've heard that there's over 500 tribes that were occupying what are known as these United States. We honor their sacrifice, their struggle, and we especially honor the ongoing struggle of the Duwamish in not being one of those 500 tribes recognized by the U.S. government. We hope that that does change in the near future. There are a couple ways to think of the Duwamish in addition to crossing that great river that runs through our town. The Duwamish do have a site on Marginal Way near Harbor Island that is lovely and very informative and worth anybody's time as many times as you wish. Or looking at their website, realrentduwamish.org. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Duwamish people and to thank the group that meets here of the Sisiwist Medicine Circle and their teacher, Siswinkle Laura Boucher, taught us this prayer of thanks and offering. What I like to do is to gather all that is human about me and my experiences, my joys, my sorrows, and I bring it to my heart, and I gather it up in my hand, and then I would raise it up to the Creator and offer it to Creator. The Creator at that point may put a gift into my hand, and I return it to my heart. As I'm saying that prayer, you can say this with me if you'd like. It is a short word, oh. So, again, trying to focus ourselves, if you wish. Deep breath with everybody. Oh. Blessed be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And now we have another of our traditions, and that is making an offering for the Divine Feminine. And Joey has kindly volunteered to do that today.
This is a prayer to the goddess. It was written by Nur Anisa Anayat Khan. Oh, goddess, pure and divine, goddess of purity, eternal deity, I long for thee. Thou mergest from the sapphire skies and manifest before mine eyes. O star endowed with mystery, O star of purity. The cloud of darkness swiftly flows, as thou the heaven doth disclose, and all life's vain illusions flee, and naught I see but thee. Ne'er heart more raptured e'er could be, since thou hast shown thyself to me, O secret of the mystic night, resplendent spark of light. In all life's sorrows and torment, thy voice appealing doth amend. Ah, heal with thy caress divine this weary soul of mine. Thou mergest from the restless sea and move my soul to ecstasy. The shell of love's sweet pearl thou art, O longing of my heart. Behold, life's vain illusions flee, since thou art manifest to me. Ne'er heart more raptured e'er could be, for naught I see but thee.
Thank you, Joey. So I want to start this service today talking about our discernment. And Interfaith Community Sanctuary has a tradition of providing a discernment every year. The ministerial circle gets together and comes up with some idea, and then they solidify it, and it's presented to all of us. And this year is no exception. I'm thinking, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm thinking that Reverend Karen had an inspiration, and that inspiration was was brought together by Michael and supported by Sally Joe and Jamal, and the ministerial circle again has provided us with a discernment for this year. And this year our discernment is making a home for the mystic heart. Now, when Michael was so kind to put that online, I spent some time reflecting on what that means. And a discernment to me is somewhat like reading a poem. You know, it's words, beautiful words, but unless you internalize them, unless they make some sense to you, they're just that. And so I looked at that. I kind of parsed it out, kind of a first take on what it means to me. And of course, I want to discuss what it means to us going forward. And this being my first blush at it, it's going to be rather simplistic. And I'm hoping that with your help, my understanding of it will deepen over time. So we start talking about discernment, and Reverend Karen devoted many of her fourth Sundays to reinforcing and deepening our understanding of the year's discernment, and I intend to do the same. So when I look at this, I look at the word what? The first word is making. So making a home for the mystic heart. Making, first of all, implies intentionality. If you're going to do anything, if you're going to make a cake, you have to decide you want to do it. So the first step is basically to decide, yes, I'm going to make this home for the mystic heart. The second thing is any kind of process of making requires taking actions, and those actions are usually broken into steps. And then thirdly, anything that we're going to do well consistently takes practice. But I'll return a little bit to this in a little bit because it's going to be the focus of today's service. So then there's making a home. When I talk about making a home for the mystic heart, my first place to go was the ultimate home, the ultimate united with the divine, which happens when we die, or it happens if we're so graced to have it happen in our lifetime. But there's also the relative home, and implicit in a home is someplace that is safe, some places that's secure. And this takes work, especially initially it takes work. But as I was taught by my mother when she read me the story of the three little pigs, that unless we build our home and we build our house with something secure and not flimsily, if we do build it with something flimsy, then certainly, then our habits, our issues with life will get away, and it'll huff and puff, and it'll blow away all of our good intentions. So the home needs to be secure. Then we get to the next one, mystic, which is a difficult one. The Oxford English Dictionary defines mystic as a person who seeks by contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with or absorption into the deity or the absolute. Now, I can live with that, but I'm not sure everybody can. And so, again, going forward, as we share our understanding and we share our experiences, I'd like to hear other people's opinion on that and help each other to understand what that really means. Certainly. A mystic is a person who seeks by contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with or absorption into the deity or the absolute. And the last word in making home for the mystic heart is heart. And to be blunt about it, we're talking about the mystic heart, not the mystic head. So this isn't about lessons. It isn't about being didactic. It isn't about trying to convince anyone of my opinion. It's going to be speaking solely from the experiences, my own personal experiences, and I hope you do the same. And perhaps quoting those people who have similar experiences but can express themselves more articulately, like the Oxford English Dictionary. That way there's no right and no wrong. There's just simply experiencing and sharing. And it's interesting, I just was thinking about, as Chris was talking about Martin Luther King, the discernment kind of reminds me a little bit of the way Martin Luther King used home in his very famous speech. He would talk about all the things that were done from the mean-spiritedness and hatred and dissent and everything else that happened before. And then he would return to, I have a dream. And then he would talk about the possibilities for us, what we can be, and then return to, I have a dream. And then he would talk about what the future could possibly bring and the aspirations he had, and return to, I have a dream. And I think we can all do that. I developed a kind of a little sentence that I repeat to myself whenever I get lost in the weeds of different things going on, and I need to ground myself and bring it back. I have a go-to kind of phrase like that. And so I think the discernment for us as a community does that. It allows us, whenever we get talking about this, that, and the other thing, at any time we can just go to that discernment and kind of ground ourselves. It brings ourselves back home again. So I said I would talk about making, more about making. And again, it starts with motivation, intentionality. Why do we want to make a home for the mystic heart? Now, if your life is completely peaceful, serene, and your life is filled with joy, you probably have no need to build anything. You don't need to go anywhere, change anything. But you can share your experiences with the rest of us, and I'm sure we'd all benefit. But if, in fact, your life is not completely peaceful, not completely serene, and you're not feeling joy at a regular occasion, then it might be time to look to find a way to build a home for that mystic heart. And we talk about this in terms of building a practice. I'm not 100% comfortable with the word practice, but it's efficacious. It works. I think most of us understand what it means when we say building a practice. But if you're going to build a home, if you're going to build anything, but you're going to need a plan. We talked about that. And Reverend Karen ran across a book that she was really impressed with, and it's called Interspiritual Meditation. And as part of our discernment, kind of tying these together, she thought we could possibly use this book as a kind of a guide to help as a community to build a home for the mystic heart, but also that each of you could go to as a kind of a text, a blueprint, something like that, to get inspiration from and to draw from if it works for you. The subtitle of this is A 7-Step Process Drawn from the World's Spiritual Traditions. And Bastian explains about his book. Interspirituality encourages contemplatives from different traditions to sit and meditate together, to enter into a deep dialogue of sound and silence, and to articulate the shared practices and experiences that are the foundations of their respective spiritual traditions. This is done not only in an attempt to understand, but to learn deeply from one another and to create a core of spiritual intimacy based upon shared experience. So I think Reverend Karen has selected a lovely book for us to use. And these 7 steps, and I'm just going to go through them briefly. This is going to be an overview. We can discuss this further as the months go on. We can get deeper and deeper into this. But just to give you kind of an overview, the 7 steps are motivation, gratitude, transformation, compassion, mindfulness, meditation, and dedication. So briefly, he speaks of motivation as, may I be happy and healthy. He speaks of gratitude as, may I be grateful for my life's many gifts. Transformation, may I be transformed into my highest ideal. Compassion, may I be loving and compassionate. Mindfulness, may I be focused and mindful through breathing. Meditation, may I become wise through meditation. May I know myself. And dedication, may I serve all beings with compassion, peace, and wisdom. So we can draw on that, and when I was looking at my own life, my own practice, I found just simply, not by intentionality, but looking back at my own practice, that I actually do incorporate many of these things into my practice every day. Gratitude. The first thing that I say to myself once I'm awake and able to put words together the very first thing I say to myself as a kind of a mantra is, this gift of a new day is being offered to me. And I just sit with that for a second, and it's a great way to start the day because I'm starting my day with a wonderful feeling of gratitude. I could start my day thinking of a lot of other things, what a shitty day this is going to be, I have all these things I have to do. But I found it much better to say, this gift of a new day is being offered to me. And then it's also a recognition and an intentionality. I'll say, accept this gift and all that it brings. And live it with awareness, with compassion, with honesty, with humor, and with patience. So I really have incorporated all of those steps in there. And then the other one, speaking more about compassion, another thing that I learned decades ago, I first was taught a practice called Tonglen. And Tonglen just simply means giving and taking and giving, in and out, whatever you want, how you want. It's a simple term. And when I first learned it, I learned it just sitting on the cushion and doing Tonglen. But over the years, it has become internalized into a kind of an ad hoc process. And so whenever I hear something, like I'll hear someone saying something mean-spirited or something ignorant, and I'll just try to connect with that person, just kind of feel their discomfort in the way I associate it, how I see their pain. I have no idea what they're feeling, but I'll have a sense of it. And then breathing that in, and through the transformational process of compassion, I'm then able to breathe out something positive to them, something comforting to them, some light and love. And I'm surprised how many times that happens a day. I live in Ballard here, and I walk down through Ballard, and I see people sitting on the street, cold, alone, and I don't know if it does anything for them, but it does a lot for me to just sit and to just stop and just be with them, to make that connection and recognize them as a fellow being. So the next thing, the other motivation is that, just simply showing up here is motivation. Being willing to be a part of this whole process is motivation. And collectively today, we showed gratitude. And we shared our experience in that showing of gratitude when we invited in our ancestors. And we shared our experience of transformation by offering to the divine feminine that I be transformed into my highest ideal. And we shared our experience of compassion when we honored our first peoples. So now we're going to be expressing our gratitude in a kind of material way, and we're going to be passing the basket around, and we're going to be sharing our wealth. And one way to share our wealth is this way, monetarily, because there's a lot that needs to be done with this sanctuary. It's over 100 years old. It requires constant upkeep. So if somebody would be willing to grab the ball, pass it around. Because in my mind, the sanctuary itself is a home for the mystic heart. And many people here share their knowledge and their experience with us. And we can draw from these gatherings that we have here, again, to help us build our own practice. There's a lot of things going on that we can draw upon in addition to these books and into our conversations of ongoing events. So I'm going to go through them here because I think they're important. We sometimes gloss over them, but every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. in person and on Zoom, we have Remembrance in the Heart of Rumi. Michael, do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, we do a traditional Sufi zikr, which is a kind of a group dance chanting experience that is the point of which is to achieve a sort of state of group ecstasy because ecstasy is a very easy path to the experience of unity. Actually, that's silly because ecstasy is the experience. It's just kind of close to that. So, but we're already there already, so it's really easy. And it's not happening tomorrow night. It starts again in February.
Thank you, Michael. And on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, and it's hard to remember, but these are online, at 7 p.m. in person only is A Course in Miracles. And as Chris mentioned, every second Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. is the Women's CWIS Medicine Circle. On Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on Zoom only is Exploring Rumi's Mathlawi, which is the 6 books of Rumi's writings that they basically go over in detail. On the first Friday of each month at 7 p.m., both in person and on Zoom, is a service of devotion to the Hagia Sophia. We talked today about making an offering to the Divine Feminine, and this is a once a month service that's here on Friday nights, on the first Friday of each month. Also on Fridays is Friday prayers in the Islamic tradition, and that's every Friday at 1:30 p.m. and currently on Zoom only, I understand. On Thursday nights, we have Sitting in Silence right here, and that's in person only. And Sitting in Silence is basically what we're going to be doing later on in the service here. Sitting in silence is just that. It's getting together in a circle, and it's not a formal thing. It's rather actually fairly social in some respects. But then we take time out to just sit for a half hour in silence. And what I like about this is that there's no prescribed methodology. There's nothing one needs to do. You can come to this and sit for a half hour in meditation, in prayer, in contemplation, and bring whatever tradition you have and you like to bring with you, and just share it in silence so that no one's offended, no one's excluded, and it's a delight. On the first Saturday of each month, this could be next Saturday, is our Meister Eckhart Reading Circle. Now, if you want to build a home for the mystic heart, I almost couldn't recommend anybody better to explain what that means than Meister Eckhart, 13th century Christian theologian, teacher, and mystic, speaks constantly of building a home for the mystic heart. He uses different words, some of them very arcane and convoluted at times, but beautifully nonetheless. And so we're going to be meeting next Saturday, actually, at 3 p.m. here, live, also and on Zoom. And this Saturday, we're going to be touching on an interesting topic of Meister Eckhart's. He's going to be speaking to the virgin birth. and his take on the virgin birth. So if any of you are interested, it's probably on our website now, because we have someone who has lovingly taken on the task of updating our website. But if you want more information and you don't have the information, you can contact me and I'll be happy to send that to you. Then on the first Sunday of every month, we also have our guiding council meeting. And that's something else that I encourage everyone to attend. It is the decision-making process, decision-making group for all material and spiritual issues in the church. And not only is it nice to have you there, but we actually need to have you there. So if you have a mind to, it's right after our next service next month. And our next service is going to be a guest speaker service next Sunday. And Chris is going to be heading up that service next Sunday, is my understanding, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about Imbolc. In the Celtic Wiccan calendar, there are 8 festivals spaced around the year, and Imbolc is early spring, time of renewal again, and building a mystic place. So I hope you enjoy it, and either through Zoom, YouTube, or in person.
Thanks, Chris. And then starting next month, we're going to be starting something new. My friend Greg here, come on up, Greg, is going to be starting a new meditation practice on Sunday evenings. I'd like him to speak a little bit about that.
Thank you, George. So next Friday, or not Sunday. Sunday is starting next week on February 4th. All right, how's that? Better? So starting next Sunday, February 4th, every Sunday from 6 to 7 p.m., we're going to have an open meditation practice that's going to be presented in the kind of traditional Buddhist practice. Like we'll be teaching, Buddhist meditations, but it's open to all. So you don't need to be Buddhist to participate or to attend. It's just, there'll be meditations presented from the Buddhist tradition. So I look forward to welcoming everyone who's interested.
All right, thank you. So now we move into the last steps in Bastian's book, and that's mindfulness. Oh, I'm sorry?
I have a question about the fundamental that you started with discernment.
Yes.
I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what it means when I read, but what does it mean?
All right. Well, discernment really means to kind of take things apart, and then to analyze. But here, it's more a matter, to me, again, speaking from my experience, it's a matter of it's a distillation process. It's taking something that's conceptual and vague and ethereal, and bringing it into something that I can hold on to, that I can make a touchstone of, that I can return to. As I was talking about before, similar to that, I have a dream. It's to ground ourselves and to stay focused, in effect. I think that's fair.
Can you clarify, the exterior group works to come up with a different discernment every year, and it's often divided by quarter or, anyway,
Michael?
I think what you said is absolutely correct. What I think of the discernment as a group inquiry or an exploration that we all do together to go deeper into some of the concepts that we just sort of throw off sometimes.
Is that right? Okay. So as I said, we're going to go into the last 3 steps right now, which are mindfulness practice, meditation, and dedication. And I see that the first 4 or 5 steps that we took as kind of building the foundation for this home of ours. And I see these last 3 steps as kind of interior design. So we're going to go into the mindfulness practice now, and I've asked Greg to kind of take us through it today and kind of lead us through this mindfulness practice. Greg?
All right, thank you, George. So, I mean, many of you have heard of meditation. It's obviously, I think probably many of you have even practiced meditation. So, there's many different types of meditation. Many of you are familiar with meditating on the breath, maybe doing some kind of, scanning or kind of internal scanning meditation where you're kind of going through the body and just kind of noticing any tightness or anything that's kind of coming up, pain. So there's, when we talk about meditation, it's kind of like talking about sports, right? There's many different types of sports. To say that you meditate is to just say that you have some kind of practice that you incorporate into your spiritual life. So today, when we talk about mindfulness, what we're really talking about is coming into the present, having a practice where we can, just day by day, kind of like this discernment, making a home. Day by day, we can implement these practices, these tools, to just come into the present, to make contact with that ground, right? If we want to build a home for the mystic heart, we need a ground, a solid ground for that home to be built on. And so this practice just starts to help to kind of cultivate that ground. Gives us a sense of presence. As we start to notice that kind of inner silence, that inner stillness in our own heart, in our own mind. And so it's a very simple practice. It doesn't need to be elaborate. Many of you, who are familiar with practicing on the breath, you can continue just to kind of use that as an object. But whatever, if you have spiritual faith where you prefer to connect with someone like Jesus or divine feminine, the object isn't really that important. It's more about having an object that you can come back to every day, right? So just to give you maybe a little bit of a metaphor for how we can understand how this practice works, I just want to use a really simple and kind of short example. So if you can imagine holding a glass of water, and inside that water you pour a handful of sand. And that sand represents all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, all of our stress, anxiety, our problems, illness, disease. And now you stir that glass of sandy water, right? And right away, that water, it just looks like a mess, right? It looks like our life. It's dissatisfying, it's cloudy, there's nothing appealing in that glass of water. And as long as you stir that glass, it's going to continue to remain clouded and obscure. But if you set that glass on the table, within a few minutes, you're going to start having some settling of the sand. And you're going to start noticing a little bit of clarity on the top of the glass. And then if you let that sit, for 10, 15, 20 minutes, gradually all that sand will settle out, and what you're left with is this pristine, clear, perfect water, right? And so it's the same way with this practice of mindfulness or meditation. Today we're going to be practicing just a very common practice called shamatha, which is calming the mind. And it's the same way. We're not doing anything magical or mystical with the mind. We're actually just using a very practical and logical practice to calm the mind, get rid of all that sediment. And so what's left is the nature of the mind, which is naturally clear, naturally luminous, naturally peaceful. And so this practice of mindfulness is just giving us a tool so that we can actually naturally settle the mind. So it's pretty simple. I'm just going to use the breath because that's a really easy place to start for everyone. But you just place your attention on the breath. And your attention is really like the stirring of the stick, right? And every time you wander to thoughts or emotions or to sounds, that's stirring. That's attention moving away from the breath. And so when you notice that, when you notice the wandering, just notice it and come back to the breath, which is letting that attention rest. That stirring stick is resting at that point. And so that's all it is. That's all we're doing in meditation. We're bringing the attention into the present, abiding on the breath. And when there's wandering, when the attention strays, we just notice it. And with mindfulness, we come back and we just, again, rest. And gradually, as we develop this muscle of mindfulness, this muscle of being present in the world, gradually we become more and more stable. And then all that negative thoughts, emotions, all that stress and anxiety of our life starts to settle out. And what's left is this naturally pristine, peaceful, open, loving presence. So we'll just sit for maybe 5-10 minutes. I don't know. We'll see how long it goes here. But I'll invite everyone to just sit up in a nice, comfortable posture. Michael over there looks perfect. The important thing when you're meditating is that you want to notice the natural structural integrity of your body, right? Like we want to have our posture represent the dignity, the inner dignity, this innate dignity of being human. And so, sit up, your back is straight, your legs are, if you're seated in a chair like we are now, your legs are kind of just comfortable and kind of grounded. You don't want to be slouching back because that's going to naturally, it's just going to kind of promote more drowsiness and more kind of dullness in your meditation. So sit up straight and just relax. Relax the shoulders, relax the neck, relax the jaw. And just start to bring your attention to the breath. Just start to notice the breath. Noticing any tension in the lungs or in the body. Just kind of let that go. You can breathe in, taking a full, deep inhale. And with a long, smooth exhale, just letting go of anything at all that you're holding on to. And then for the next 5 minutes, just place the attention wherever the breath is strongest. That might be the nose, it might be the feeling of the ribs expanding at the chest. It might be the belly. Wherever that sensation of the breath is most prominent. Just let your attention come to rest there. Just connect with the breath. And then just ride the inhale and the exhale. Of course, the attention is going to wander. It's going to drift off to thoughts or sensations. Just notice that wandering. And with mindfulness, bring the attention back to the breath. Again and again, mind wanders. We just come back to the present. Gradually, our thoughts start to settle. Our body starts to get more relaxed. You might notice a sense of stillness or silence or spaciousness. Just come back to the breath. right, so that's it. That's just that as a simple daily practice, where you can sit, find some place in your house. Could be your bedroom, could be if you have a personal study, or a place where you do yoga or where you work out, who knows. But just as a daily practice, it doesn't need to be a big project. Just having a daily practice where we kind of tune into the present, even just for a few short minutes like this, can really transform our day in our life, and set us out, to be more present, more embodied in the world. So, thank you, George.
Thank you. So generally speaking, when we think of meditation, Greg is talking about meditation, but at least I think of meditation, and stealing from the Buddhist tradition. There's fundamentally two types of meditation, and they call it shamatha and vipassana. And shamatha, again, this is oversimplification, but shamatha is an outgoing meditation. It's looking outward. It could be a mantra. It could be looking at a candle. It could be following the breath. And that's the shamatha meditation and the mindfulness practice we just did. The second form of meditation is vipassana, and that's an inward-looking meditation, getting to know ourselves. And getting to know ourselves has been the mystical rallying cry for a long time. 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, over the temple of Apollo in Delphi, it said, "Know thyself." And we continue to do that today. And so there's these two different practices. But if I were to take this lamp and try to explore someplace dark and unfamiliar, two things would have to happen for the lamp to be useful for me. One is I would have to stop it from flickering. I'd have to make sure that all the external influences that are around this lamp are calm, and I don't have a flickering light. The second thing I would have to do is look internally, and I would have to metaphorically adjust our wick, trim our wick to get the maximum illumination. And so having a bright light flickering doesn't help us. Having a flickering light that's dim doesn't help us. It takes both of them in order to be able to navigate our way, to see clearly as we do the self-investigatory work. So now we're going to move to that inward-looking process. We're going to be looking at meditation, the vipassana meditation. And again, I've asked Greg to take us through that process.
All right, thanks, George. I really like that that metaphor there for going on this inner journey. You could say, he kind of used the metaphor of exploring a cave, and how we need this clear but luminous candle or light. In the same way, this practice of vipassana is kind of specific to the Buddhist teachings, and it's really about that kind of turning our focus from looking outside, right, at any object like the breath or anything outside of us, and really turning the lens back on the mind itself, right? Turning the attention back on the mind itself and looking within, right? Exploring the inner landscape of our own mind through this practice. So vipassana, as George said, it means, it often is just translated as insight, but it can also mean like clear seeing, right? And so again, because I like metaphors, I'm going to come back to the water that we used before. So before we were talking about, the cup and the sediment kind of settles out, right? And that's kind of like what the process with the candle is, where by getting rid of agitation, which is like the flickering candle, but also bringing out the clarity of the mind, which is like that clear, pristine water. In this case, it's like that luminous candle, right? That sets the stage for this inner exploration, right? So shamatha, the kind of mindfulness practice that we just did, is kind of a preliminary, if you will, for a practice like vipassana. Because we need to stabilize the mind, and we also need to kind of develop this kind of inner clarity before we can really kind of go on this kind of inner exploration. And so there's many different types of vipassana practices. It can be as simple as like a contemplative or kind of analytical practice, where we're maybe looking at impermanence or the presence of our own kind of mortality. It could be looking at in the Buddhist tradition, we look at dependent origination and like how all things are interconnected, right? And so that can be kind of this kind of inner analytical or inner kind of contemplative meditation. Today what we're going to do is we're really going to kind of turn that lens back on the mind itself and look at the mind, right? So there's three kind of aspects. This comes from the Mahamudra tradition, which you could say is maybe an advanced teaching, but it doesn't mean advanced because it's like beyond us, right? It's not like higher than us. It just means that these teachings are very direct. They point directly to the mind. And so these three things that I want you to notice today when we practice this insight or this vipassana technique are awareness, movement, and stillness. So awareness is just this kind of knowing quality of the mind, right? I'm aware. I know my experience. Movement kind of encapsulates anything that's arising in our experience. So there's outer movement, there's forms and sounds and any kind of sensory phenomena. There's inner movement, which is the movement of thoughts and emotions, memories, any kind of internal play of experience. And then there's what we call secret movement, which is just the luminosity of the mind itself, right? This kind of inner clear light, this kind of inner light of consciousness. And so that's always appearing, right? And so when we strip away the kind of particulars of our experience, like when we don't get caught up on, this feeling, this thought, this emotion, and we just let all that be. It's just movement. It's just play. We can just watch it. We can just notice it, and then just let it be as it is, right? Just kind of let it be. And that's how we notice movement in the meditation. And then the third one is stillness. And stillness, in this, we start to develop a relationship with stillness in the practice of shamatha or mindfulness meditation, where we start to notice this kind of inner peace, this inner stillness. It can be this feeling of like openness or space. But we can just start to notice that. And so in this practice of just looking at the mind, just kind of, rather than focusing too heavily on the breath, you can still kind of ride the breath just as like a rhythm. But the attention is kind of turning back and just looking at the mind itself. What am I noticing? Am I noticing awareness? Am I noticing movement? Am I noticing stillness? Just, that's it. There's nothing really kind of, it's not too complicated. We're just paying attention to what's coming up in our experience. And at first it's going to seem like movement and stillness are contradictory, like they can't coexist, right? There's either, all of us when we start, there's just movement. That's all there is. There's awareness and there's movement, and it's just chaos all the time, right? But we start to notice stillness. And as we start to develop more familiarity, more kind of connection to stillness in our life, then this play between movement and stillness, they start to kind of interact a little bit more. Where you start noticing stillness within movement, and you start noticing movement within stillness. And so as you engage in this meditation, we'll just sit for another maybe 5 minutes or so. But just pay attention. Don't have any kind of big, nothing, there's no enlightenment going to happen in this room today. No grand experiences. But just pay attention to your own mind and just see if you can start to notice these three things: awareness, movement, and stillness. So I'll again invite you just to find a comfortable seat. Maybe just spend a minute or two kind of just getting settled, just kind of coming back to the breath, letting go of any tension. It's perfectly fine to connect with the breath if that's where you feel comfortable. Just kind of starting to settle the mind. Just noticing this awareness of the breath, this awareness of movement right here. Breath is just arising and falling. Just letting that be as it is. It's free in its own place. If you find that inward turning attention kind of turning outwards and starting to follow after a train of thoughts or just starting to look outside, again, just with mindfulness, just kind of gently come back and reconnect. Just kind of inviting you to notice the stillness in the mind amidst all the movement. you find yourself caught up in the movement. Just noticing that and just letting it be as it is. You don't need to fight your experience. Just relax, let go. So that's a very brief introduction to this practice of insight. And you know, one of the things if you play with this in your own practice, one of the benefits is that as you start to notice the stillness within movement and the movement within stillness, then this sense of inner peace, the sense of this ground that we're talking about, it's something that you can actually carry with you in the world, right? As you're walking down the street, as you're going to work, as you're driving in a car, you can start to notice that this stillness kind of pervades your whole life, actually. And it becomes the center upon which all of your relationships, all of your interactions can start to kind of revolve around, right? It becomes the center of your spiritual practice. So thank you all, and thank you, George, for the invitation to share this today.
Thank you, Greg. So, for some of you, this sitting silently for a while is uncomfortable. I can actually see some body movements. Not everybody is yet comfortable with sitting in silence, but it's going to be a major part of our discernment for this year. And it's certainly going to be a major part for any of these fourth Sunday services that I am invited to facilitate. But it's going to be central. I want to read, I thought it'd be interesting to read this quote here from the Centers for Spiritual Living, someone named Roger Julien. Every great activity and event, every true encounter with the divine must begin by turning off the mind and turning within to that place where true wisdom resides. Ideas are born in the quiet of the mind. Nature gives us a model for our spiritual endeavors, teaching us to silence outer confusion and noise, so spirit's soft voice can be heard. We encounter the divine in the stillness at the center of our being. So it's going to be my intention to introduce a Vipassana, an insight meditation from a different tradition each month. And if any of you have something you'd like to share, a practice that you have, please let me know, and we see if we can find a time to work that in and have you share that with us as well. I picked Greg this week because, as it turns out, the writer of this book, Edward Bastian, he comes to the writing of this book from a Tibetan Buddhist lineage, tradition. So I thought it was all the more fitting that Greg be our first speaker and our first introducer of internal meditative practice as well. So now we get to the dedication stage of it. And it really is a matter of intentionality, what we're going to do. I use the, wherever I put it, I use the symbol of the manger. Because many of us think that there's no room in our life for a practice. That everybody's too busy, nobody's concerned about this, and that it takes a backseat. But we need to keep looking until we can find a home. And it may begin modestly. It may begin extremely modestly. But eventually, miracles will happen. So we close this, basically, by making, hopefully, a commitment to making a home in the mystic heart, but to use that experience that we gain from that to inform our daily life and bring that knowledge and that awareness into our relationships and our activities. So now it's time to close things out, to release our ancestors, allow Reverend Karen to go home and rest. And it's time now for sharing of our hearts. And we're going to say goodbye to our friends online. And this is the point where we ask, and in all of you, what's welling up in your